Man, Alexa sucks. I don't know if anyone else here, I'm sure people listening have an Alexa. She sucks. Alexa, play Top Country. I don't care why you stop playing music. Just play music.
From Mooresville, Indiana, he drives the Daystar Directional Drilling, Edco General Contractors, Collision Concepts, BooyahDarts.com 35. It's Zach Hampton.
All right, so we're cleaned up. Got all the fiberglass cleaned up. I moved the car, vacuumed. Got all the tools cleaned up off the bench. So I've got a rear end set up here. Justin will probably fast forward through this, but I'm actually I don't have a brand new rear to put in. The new rear is in this car that we'll start with. So this rear's got like 5 nights on it, so it's gonna go in the spare car. But he'll probably fast forward. I'm going to tear this thing apart and kind of clean up where we couldn't really reach while it was all together. And then we'll go through assembling that and start putting it in. All right, so clean my hands while we do this. We're cleaned up. The main part is going to be your brakes. Getting that on. I'll show you your studs and whatnot, but regardless of where you order it, you can get them with titanium ones, you can get them with steel, whatever. These ones, I believe, had it in. This is a, like, full-blown whatever, best of everything. Like, if you called DMI and said, I want, all the good stuff, all the extras, whatever, that would be this. Not how I normally order my rears, but there was one of the bigger teams was switching to winners, and they had like 2 or 3 new, like this was one of them. And they had 2 or 3 new ones, and I bought them new, but at the price like I would have paid for my normal rears. So as you can see, these have got tie nuts here, but I want to say, yeah, that rear in that car has them too, but I think I only have 2 of I've got 5 rears, and only 2 of them have that option and like the tie lower shaft, all that. So not a big advantage. I mean, you probably lose a pound if you get that on your rears. So it's definitely not important. The tie lower shaft I usually order, that's rotating weight, so that helps. But let's go ahead and get started. So I did want to show you guys on the aluminum nuts. I was talking about them. You have to be really careful. As you can see, this one almost stripped as I took it off. This one's not in great shape. So there are places where when you tighten your aluminum jet nuts, they're almost a one-time use. So I wouldn't use them somewhere that you're going to be taking it on and off and on and off. But if it's something that stays on for a good amount of time, then definitely, they're good to have or use. So I've got 2 new ones of these, or they appear to be extremely new, so I'm not too worried about them being stripped. So we're going to use those. I run Smith inboard brakes, tie. I use his caliper and everything. So he's got a couple different types of hubs here. I run this style, so I doubt you can hear, but this is a floater style. So it's actually able to just move around a little bit. So how that's going to go on those splines is you've got this top piece, and then you've got this bottom piece that will come on once I've moved those bolts up. All right, so that's going to slide in, and then those two nuts that we just replaced are these two. So you're going to clamp with these, and then these are like a safety to just kind of help. So we'll go ahead and get this going. One other thing I actually wanted to mention that you would want to do before you do your brakes, anything else, and a lot of things I'm like, oh, you could do this. Some guys do it, some don't. Some guys don't do this. If you don't do this, then in my opinion, you have no business even touching a sprint car. So on a rear axle, this shiny part isn't going to come shiny. The rear axle gets anodized. That's anodized. So what you're going to do is, I'll just take this with me. You're going to emery cloth that to where it's shiny. And it can take a bit. Like I've got, several. I've got, what is this? This is 180, 240. I know I've got some 120. So like I usually start with 120 and then maybe skip the 180, maybe not. It just kind of depends on how much of a pain it's being. They're not the most fun thing in the world to do, but if you just do it, it takes 10 minutes to do the whole thing, and your bird cages will slide on and on, or off and on properly every time. If you're just jamming your bird cages on there, I hope there's always snow in your driveway, because it's just not right. So we're going to go ahead and get this started, and that's going to line up good. So we've got two, back this off a bit. What's going to hold the caliper on is right here. You've got two spots for bolts. So I've got the bolts right here, but we're not quite there yet. So you're going to slide this on, get it sort of close-ish. You're not going to be able to get it perfect. And then we're going to get our secondary piece, make sure these are up out of the way. The biggest pain is making sure you're in the right slots when you go to slide this on. So there we are. And these are an Allen. I want to say they are 5/16. So we're going to get these started, but I'm going to get them close. But you got to be able to slide this back and forth. I'll show you. So you don't want to tighten these yet. Just kind of get them to where they start to grab and then back them off maybe a turn. All right, so as you can see, I can still slide that back and forth. Now, this caliper already bled, all that. So normally, I'm not going to go through all of it. You've got a little pin here, and then this bolts through, and then that comes out. You can take the pads out, and then you would just get this over, obviously without the pads, and you would center your caliper in here before you even put the pads in. And you would get your caliper bolted on, and actually I'm going to let that sit. This is these bolts, I put a very small amount of blue Loctite. You'll probably be able to tell if Justin fast forwards, I was struggling a bit to get them out, but that's what you want. You definitely don't want your inboard caliper falling off while you're racing. And you don't want anything falling off, but you definitely don't want this. If this falls off and rips the line, you're going to have zero brakes. And even if it doesn't rip the line, you're not going to have very good brakes. because your front really doesn't do a whole lot. So don't want to snug that one yet. You've kind of, it'll be hard to show, but I'll try to. You've kind of got to turn this, and I believe it's like this on just about every brand, but you kind of got to turn it to where you have this opening in the right spot to be able to get your socket and bolt through there. All right, so now that one's kind of snugged up. Get that one snugged up. I'm going to grab the torque wrench. I'm sure there's a, completely proper torque spec on this, on these bolts. I go 35, maybe 40. I'm sure Stevie Smith, if you called there, you could get like the actual whatever, the full proper, but at 35 with just a touch of blue Loctite, I've never had any trouble with these even remotely coming loose. So it works for me. So that's just what I do. So that one ended up 36, which is perfectly fine. All right. So I'm just going to kind of coil that up. Now I'm going to tip this back up, maybe, for this next part. Ooh, get the camera there. Right, so you can see our two Allens there. I'm going to put them up to the top so that I can reach these. I'm going to start these. And then Stevie actually has on here, wrote or, etched that it's going to be 30 foot-pounds. So I just need to grab my 5/16 Allen socket. I should mention they have several people make them. I had a home one that I made myself before it broke. But you mount your rears by this, like onto the table while you build or work maintenance your rears. And they're super nice and handy to have instead of trying to hold the rear while you're trying to do stuff. Definitely suggest having one of those if you're going to do a lot of rears. So now on these little nuts, 192 inch-pounds is what we're going to go to. And then that way, at least if something happens or they break, whatever, right, I can tell Stevie that that's what it was set at. If we have to diagnose a problem. If you don't know anything about torque, 192 is not much. You can definitely just hold the rotor from spinning while you do it. 192 exactly. All right. So next, I believe, nope, I didn't put them in there. There they are. So you've got two types of spacers. You've got one that's nice, flat, right, all the way around. And then you've got this one that's kind of got a little bit of an indent there. So that indent is going to go on the left rear. As you can see, this side has splines afterward. This side does not. So you're going to take your flat. We're actually going to take it back off, but that is going to slide right back there. And if you have to, I usually do it pretty much every week. I'll just Dremel inside here out. Like I take these off when we do maintenance, and I just run the Dremel through there on the inside. They'll just get tight and tight from all the pressure of the rears and, you know, like the shaking, everything. So take those off and Dremel them. If you leave them on, you're going to have a lot of fun trying to get them off the next time that they have to. As you can see, this one's been Dremeled, but they just wear a mark in it, and they can be a real pain in the ass. So I'm going to leave these off for now because I don't want to touch the grease, but we're going to grease both of these before we put these on, and then, you know, bird cages and all that. So leave them off for now. The next step for me, not that it really matters since this is kind of a, not kind of a, but a used frame. I'm just in the habit of doing it. What are you doing, Ollie? I tape my rails. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. You're just kind of trying to protect the paint while you put it in. Obviously, if you're in a hurry at the track, you're not going to get to do this. But to me, I'm in the shop. I have the time. Why not try to protect it a little bit? And really, it's going to help the axle as well. I'd probably be less worried about it if I wasn't wrestling, getting a rear in on my own most of the time. Oh. But when you're doing it alone, you almost have no choice but to kind of, it's going to slide around on you. So now you guys can watch me struggle. So I like to set this down, kind of balance while I switch sides here. And I'm going to slide that forward so I can kind of show you. As you can see, I mean, we still hurt the tape, but the paint, you know, the powder coat looks fine. So at least we tore up some tape and not the powder coat itself. Next step is going to be getting the torque tube and drive shaft hooked up. Before we're worried about any of the other components going on, we'll do those. All right, so torque tube going to be up first. Now this is new. It just rides, as you can see, that little wear mark, right? So I always have my torque ball and ball housing ride on it in the trailer, so it still kind of wears a little bit of a groove, but it doesn't really matter, right? So I'm going to hang just that little bit over the edge here, because we're going to go ahead and put some grease on this. I use a white lithium grease on here. This gets redone every few nights. You know, if we do a 3-day weekend, I'll let it go 3. But the ball itself, which we'll get to that, is going to get done every night. So this gets a lot less grimy than the ball does. So you can go a few nights. I wouldn't go pushing it much past that. But I don't want a big heavy grease on here. That's why I use the white lithium. You probably could get away with going longer if you used a heavier grease, but for me at least, I want this to be really, really free in there. And with a heavy grease, it's going to stick more. So you're going to want, I think you should use, a grease more like this, a thinner grease, and then just maintenance more often. Kind of puts you in a good place anyways when you have to take it apart to catch anything that you maybe wouldn't have if you weren't taking this apart. So try not to get this stuff everywhere. Guess it wants to roll that way now. So I'm going to pull the rear end as far back and kind of to the right as I can to give myself some room. And then we're just going to come through here. Try to get, not enough over. There we go. So then once I get it in there, I'm going to try to get it really worked around there on the ball. Right? And then we'll push that forward. So next step is going to be getting the drive shaft ready. So this just came back probably in November from Aaron Long AL Driveline. Hands down the best drive shafts out there. You by no means need a titanium drive shaft. They're super nice to have though. This was in, if anyone saw my Lernerville crash where the pitman arm broke and just head on into the wall, this drive shaft was in there and there wasn't much left of that car, but this drive shaft was one of them. So they're a little bit more pricey than a steel, but they're going to last a lot longer, especially these gun drilled style ones. They're just super, super nice. Aaron does a great job. So I'm going to grab some gloves because this grease is extremely thick. So I should just need one. I already put some in the coupler on the rear, but I'll show you how I kind of work this around once I do it. So I'm going to go this side first. This is where the U-joint will go onto from the motor. So just kind of get it all the way around there. And then we can work it back and forth. Now, if I had, I don't know what U-joint I'm going to put on yet. If I had that with me, I would kind of just work this down in there a bit. But I can always use one of my other drive shafts when that time comes and just clean it back off afterwards. So not a huge deal. But you definitely want enough. This is something that doesn't get maintenance every race. This is probably more every 4 is, I would say, what I can go. 6 if I'm on small tracks and whatnot. But if you're running Eldora, Knoxville, stuff like that, you definitely are going to want to maintenance and grease your driveline, your shaft, as Aaron calls it, more often. So, and it's not, I mean, it's something you can do as often as you want if you wanted to do it more. I know some guys who do it more. I don't really have the manpower, I would say, to be able to pull it out every night. So I've never had any troubles with this grease and going 4 or 5, like I said, 6 nights even on smaller tracks if I need to. But you definitely don't want to push it too much if you like your legs, which I do, even though they're not very big. Righto. So we've got that greased, and we're going to try not to get it absolutely everywhere. But I'm going to show you what I mean, what I said with this end, by doing it in the rear, just to make sure it's nice and spread evenly. Like I said, I already put some in the rear, so we're just going to kind of work it in and out a few times, different slots, etc. Make sure you've got plenty. Yep, I like that. So get this a little more centered for a second. So I'm going to show you guys how this works out of the car, because I'm just not going to be able to get the angle that I want once it's in the car. So probably going to have to try to do one hand here. So what's happening here, that zip tie is just kind of holding that in place. It's not going to go anywhere, but you see this ring here? That actually goes down in, right, as you can see. And then we're going to use this pin. There's a groove in there, and we're going to snap that pin into place, and that's what's going to hold the drive shaft all the way in the rear end. And then with the rear end being fixed and everything, it's going to maybe move a little bit inside the U-joint, which I suppose I might as well show you guys one. So this is getting a new yoke part. As you can see, it's just got a lot of knights on it. So I replaced this part. The U-joint part's good. The base is good. So I'm just going to replace this before we put the motor in. But as you can see, that's what's going to go in there. And then that bolts onto the motor. So it'll slide inside the U-joint just a little bit because of how the rear end is going to be fixed in place, right? Like when it goes up and down, it has no choice but to go forward and back because it's going to kind of move. The rear moves on like this kind of angle, just with how everything's tied in, and not a ton, but a little bit. So we're going to go ahead, take that back out. We're going to slide our drive shaft inside here. I'm going to grab a couple of paper towels because there's just almost no way to get this stuff on your hands if you don't have something. So we've got that, and we're going to use the jack to help us hold the rear end. All right, so get the rear to what looks like pretty centered, right? And then I'm just going to go all the way back with it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to tilt. Let's get that in there. Try to get that angle right. So now I'm going to grab this, get it started, drop this to kind of raise the nose there. As you can see, that slid in a lot better. All right, so it's kind of wanting to go. It's just not wanting to stay because there's an air pocket. So we're going to go ahead and grab our whatever plier deals, snap ring pliers. Can't think of the word. Go there and there. Really, I'm going to go ahead and grab it because I know I'm going to want it. I suggest grabbing yourself a pick or a screwdriver, something. You almost always have to give it just a little help on the opposite end that you're working on. So we're going to go like that. Squeeze these together. There we go. So once you get it where you think it's in, you definitely want to go. There we go. So it looked in. Go around, push every, edge, or take a screwdriver and just kind of put pressure and go around and make sure that that thing is fully snapped in there. Because it will definitely play tricks on you or look like it's in and it's not. And that's a quick way to blow up a motor. If you get the motor spinning and then that falls forward out of the rear, it's going to zing the motor and pretty much guarantee you a trip back to the engine builder and probably need some new rings and, a few other $1,000 worth of stuff. So double, triple check that. Make sure that snaps before you just call it good. So I can put my lid back on my grease there. My hands are clean. So next step is we're going to get this hooked up to here. So I'm actually probably going to want that pick to get those washers off. So like everything, I try to keep my nuts and washers on whatever they're going to go to. Just usually a more sure bet than keeping them in the bins or, wherever you keep your nuts and bolts. That way you don't accidentally use them for something else. These are the same nuts as a header bolt to put on your headers, which is why I try to keep them separate, or just, like I've got those laying around in all my wing trays. Come on. So I just want to make sure I have the proper amount for the rears when I go to do them. Hi, buddy. Hi, buddy. Ollie's like way ready for bed. It's about 8:30 here now. It's Sunday. We took a bit of a break when I got lunch. I say lunch, I didn't eat till 4 o'clock. And then I went ahead when I got back with my food. I gave him some, and now he's just looking at me like, dude, can we go to bed now? So the other important thing to note, I'm sure you guys can see this nut. The biggest thing, doesn't matter where that goes, I always face mine down. Always make sure that goes the same way every time you put it on and off, whether you face that straight up, straight down, whatever. That's just important that your torque tube is going on the same exact direction every time. And that way, if anything were to happen, if it got bent, if it got whatever, right? It's going to be okay. Going on that direction, you didn't put it on a different direction. So, ideally you should be checking those for straight. If you heard anything in the rear end, or had a major wreck, maybe it didn't hurt anything in the rear end, but you had a good hit, that should be getting checked regardless. But I know how it can be some nights or, days, whatever, going from track to track, and Friday to Saturday, whatever, and you're in a rush. So just make sure that goes on the same way every time. And if something did get hurt, it can at least save you a bit. And that's not me saying if it's bananaed, you can just put it on the same way and it's going to be fine. I would say the best thing you can do with any of your stuff, any of this, the number one thing, even if you do it different, is just be consistent. Do it the same way every time. There's already so many variables in sprint car racing that you have absolutely no control over. So the stuff you do have control over, or can have control over, you've got to have that. There's some guys who torque these. I would say if you do, probably around 25, 27, 30 probably tops. I don't torque them. I just, I double check, triple check, make sure they're tight and whatnot. So I'm going to go and push this forward. Oh, well, hope if I take it off the jack. It's good progress. The front end, I got to get one tore apart. I got to get a front end tore apart here tomorrow too before we start going on that. So, but I would say kind of the biggest things, or where a lot of the speed is going to be for guys, not even that mine is, completely the right way. I think I'm in the ball house, but that's going to come from squaring the car, how a guy squares it, how a guy blocks it. Not so much blocking, but squaring, and then, some ride heights in your motor and that kind of stuff is definitely where most of the magic happens, I think, for everyone right now, is just motors, the car being right and free, and shocks. So we'll start getting into that in the next part.